Chair, members of the panel and distinguished guest, we'd like to start. And so you ready? Now I don't have a choice. I wanted to kind of skip you, but now I don't have a choice. So we'll start with the two of you. Short 2 minutes, and then we'll call on Tiaard, Bodenstein, Mudarikwa, Samai, and Matthijs to join us here in the front.
I greet everyone in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. I thank you for the opportunity. It's an honor to be here in the house of God, His people. And I thank the government for giving us the opportunity to say what we have to say. Through all the traumas and hurt that we went through and the suffering. I greet the Deputy President. I greet the panel. And I thank you for this opportunity. But I and my people, the so-called colored people, and even the black people that I know, stay together in Belgravia, opposite Athlone Stadium. I'm also a friend of Trevor Manuel, the previous Minister of Finance. I was in the battle in 1976 in the riots with Gary Cruiser too. But what I'm seeing now is a happening that is happening when the first regime control. But I can say that the ANC did well over the years. We can all go to beautiful resorts where the first regime went. We can go to the beaches. They have done well, they've done their best, but they can do better. Come, let's give a hand to the ANC. Then we also give a hand to the DA. They're also trying their best to control. It's not a joke. To be in a position of a leader is not a joke. To be a senior elder of the Khoisan, of the Metro, is not a joke. When I put the skiri down, I can stop a meeting and I can let the meeting go on. I don't care how you look at my color. It's not about the color. It's about the suffering. It's about stealing my ground that I owned in Elsies River, Lousabos, acres of ground. I am the grandchild of Sam Khan. He was the lawyer of Joe Slovo. He's from Tel Aviv. He had shops in Nova Street. He had money in the bank, but he had to flee out of South Africa. What happened to his name? What happened to his money? What happened to his properties that he owned? And then I have a grandma from Oudtshoorn. And that grandma was a Khoisan woman. She could make the roosterbroodjies on stone. She could do anything that a Khoisan does, herbs and everything. And what happened to my heritage? I'm not ashamed to be in this body. But I'm telling you today, stop fighting, man. Stop fighting the government. Stop fighting the local government. Stop fighting yourselves. Come with a petition. Come with a pen and a book. Come with technology, intelligence, and tell the government, help us. We need your help. I think the ANC saved my job. In 1997, I wanted to be a caretaker at a school in Bridgetown, and my own people wanted to work me out because of the skin. But I went to an ANC office, and that people, Max Ozinski, they helped me. And the Premier of Western Cape came to the school and told the principal, you are out of order, you're going to lose your job. And I didn't know how powerful we were. It's not about your color. It's about what you know about your rights. And I'm telling you today, you got a lot of rights. But don't use it the same way somebody uses it that is evil. And I pray, I'm also an apostle of the Christian faith. I pray that you will all unite and come together with the black and the white and the pink and the orange, the rainbow nation. The Metro is in a mess because the one wants to be better than the other. And now I'm going to introduce my king of the Metro here, King Kuahap. Can you stand, please, King? There's the king of the Metro, King Kuahap Cornelius of the Koringaikona tribe. A Koringaikona tribe is a Cape Khoi tribe. And then I got the spokesperson of the WHC, and I'm also joined with him in Senate, Reverend Greg Fick. Can you stand, please? Let's give a hand to these people. These people fight for your communities. But I'm here to share with you 2 minutes.
No, you've already extended.
Is it over?
Yes, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your contribution. Thank you very much. Next, please.
One, two. Molweni bahlali. Ndibulise nalapha kwizithwalando ezethu. Ndibulise kakhulu apha ku deputy president, former deputy president, uTata uKhalima Motlanthe, ndithi dumela ntate. Zimbalwa into endizawuthetha ngazo apha bahlala, ndisosithethi iside. Ndifuna nje ukucinizela uba ndindawujonga apha. Ndawujonga apha abahlali ndifumana into yobana basithi sodwa aba balapha abaninzi thina sizwe esintsundu. Xa ndithetha ngentsundu ke ndithetha ngebrown and black. Andikho racist kuloo nto leyo. Ndindawujonga ndibona uba sithi sedwa aba kodwa ke siyathanda udlala ngala malwimi asemzini. Kulilungelo ke lokwenza loo nto kodwa abantu abakuthi abaninzi abeva. Into endizawuthetha ngayo mna apha inye yimbuyekezo yabantu. Ever since urhulumente we-apartheid wenza ngayo into abantu bathina masihlale phantsi kwe-division ngolu hlobo sililo kuthiwe namhlanje kukho abantu abangamakhaladi, kukho abantu abangamaXhosa, kukho abantu abangama-India. Besingabantu abanye, collectively, si-united. And ngoku sithe sawukhululeka sathi sa. Imithetho ke esibangela uba sithi sa yile mithetho sithetha ngayo. Ndiyacinga into yobana into esayiphosayo kurhulumente wethu ebengena ezihlalweni kukuthetha ngembuyekezo uba andiyiva imbuyekezo ikhona apha kubantu ebebecinizelwe ngurhulumente wamabhulu wobandlululo. Andiva apha kuthethwa ngembuyekezo. And andiwuboni umthetho othi siza kwenza ntoni ukunikezela abantu ebebecinizelwe ilungelo. Ndiyabona kapha nxa sihamba sithetha namhlanje. Even the youngest one in our democracy today, Umalema, he's got his own foundation. Bonke ke bane foundation usuka kutata uMandela ukuya party. There is no apartheid foundation. Why singenayo apartheid foundation? Because sesihlukunyeziwe. Why ingekho loo nto leyo? Ndizama ukuthi ke zinkokheli kusekho le nto into yobana uba igama lethu li-underminwe ngabantu abamhlophe. Even ne-TRC azange libonakalise uba igama lethu oko lisarhuqwa edakeni nangoku. Ndiyacinga into yobana uba kumele ke sibabizeni nootata uDesmond Tutu ngoku basaphilayo noba uDumisa Ntsebenzo bake beze bazowuthetha into yobana uba ingeba bonela na yindlela okanye sabuyekezwa ngayo, ingeba irayithi na. Bendicimba mna namhlanje besingazukhala uba niyabona nangoku apha phandle xa nijongayo i-Labour Act yalapha eMzantsi Afrika ayisikhuseli thina, ikhusela abantu abamhlophe. Abantu abamnyama nangoku ungaphuma apha phandle ujonga apha phandle, andikho racist okanye andinazanofobia. Ungajonga phaya ngabantu baseAfrika baklini toilets zethu ngoku phaya. Ungahamba ubheka apha ikhona indoda ibike yathetha le isuka ngapha efama le imele amafama. Ungayojonga nangoku amafama asafaka abantu bethu kwikhofeni, asatyisa abantu bethu amathumbu ezinja. Umthetho wethu awenzi into.
Thank you.
Ndiyacinga ke lastly, Honorable Chair, lastly ndingayikuwastanga ixesha lakho ixhomekeke kuthi ke ngokusithi kurhulumente nantsi iposition yethu khanike nisiphathele into yobana uba yintoni enisinika ngayo ngokwembuyekezo because amazwe anjengo-amerika ayayibuyekeza ivietnam thina apha sesicinizelo. Enkosi.
So just to bring us all on the same page, that we will now concentrate on the last group. We've mentioned to you this morning that the high-level panel have divided ourselves into 3 groups. The first group looked at triple challenge of inequality, poverty and unemployment, as well as wealth creation. The second group at land reform, restitution, redistribution, and security of tenure. The third group at nation building and social cohesion. Now, we realize, as we've indicated, that some of these issues are cross-cutting. There's interlinkages, but that people are taking a particular entry point into these issues. So now I would like to see, Mr. Tiart is here. Tiart is here? Okay, Jean Bodenstein. Yes. Mudarikwa from, yes, Mudarikwa from the Legal Resources Center. And then Siam Samai, she's here from Women's Legal Resource Center. And then Clinton Matesa. Okay, these will be our first 5. Please introduce yourself again, and you have about 3 minutes. I'm a bit lenient, so I may give you a few minutes extra, but when I say 1 minute left, then you really have 1 minute left. Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the panel, fellow stakeholders and esteemed guests. My name is Martin Tiart. I'm an attorney at the Center for Environmental Rights. We are activist lawyers who help communities and civil society organizations realize our constitutional right to a healthy environment by advocating and litigating for environmental justice. We made 11 separate submissions to the panel on 10 different acts, and most of those acts can be classified as environmental legislation, apart perhaps from 2, which is the Promotion of Access to Information Act and the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act. And I will refer to those acts as PAIA and PAJA as I go along in my presentation. The majority of our presentations were to the working group on nation building and social cohesion, and therefore I'll be focusing on some broad overarching themes that we covered in those submissions and not in our other submissions. As the Honourable Panel is aware, 2 of the main focus areas of the working group on nation building and social cohesion are levels of trust between and amongst citizens and institutions, and social solidarity and active participatory citizenry. And the 2 overarching themes that I mentioned that I will be addressing today relate to access to information and public participation in environmental governance in South Africa. Access to information. As the honourable members are aware, PAIA, or the Promotion of Access to Information Act, was enacted to give effect to our constitutional right of access to information. But it's often interpreted by public and private bodies to whom we submit requests in terms of that act as a tool that limits access to information, where the default position is always non-disclosure, when it should be the other way around. Just to illustrate my point, over the past 5 years we've been submitting many PAIA requests, and only 40% of the records that we requested were actually released. The reasons for non-disclosure include that our requests were simply ignored, which was the majority of the cases. Some of our requests that were granted did not lead to the actual disclosure of the information. In other words, the records we requested were never released. sometimes they were refused on very shaky grounds without explanation or reasons for the decision to refuse disclosure of information. And sometimes records simply just could not be found. Our worst performer is the Department of Department of Mineral Resources, beg your pardon. Only 12% of the records we requested from them last year were released. And just to make it clear, we very rarely engage in fishing expeditions. We request very elementary records, such as licenses, rights, permits, etc. What are our recommendations? Well, we recommend that all rights, authorizations, licenses, permits that are issued in terms of legislation are made easily accessible to the public by, for instance, publication of these records online or keeping hard copies on site so that members of the public can access them. Public participation. The main tool regulating public participation in the environmental sector in South Africa are our environmental impact assessment regulations. We've identified three main problems with those regulations. The first is that the timeframes for public participation are extremely short. They're truncated and they're very rigid. Public participation is also performed in perfunctorily or conducted perfunctorily, or it's usually just a tick box exercise. And the views of interested and affected parties are never really seriously considered. The other problem we have is that public participation ends after the application process is complete. Project proponents often do not engage with interested and affected parties after rights or licenses or permits have been granted. There are some peculiar problems in some of the other legislation. For instance, public participation in respect of water use license applications is not compulsory, and it is done only when the minister requires it, which means that public participation in respect of water use license applications is very rarely conducted. And we believe that that's in conflict with the Promotion of Administrative Justice Act, which says that administrative justice or administrative action must be procedurally fair when it has the ability to materially and adversely affect rights. The Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Act allows government to grant mining rights in respect of land that is occupied by communities without their consent. And we believe that that is in conflict with the Interim Protection of Informal Land Rights Act and the customary principle of consent. Our recommendations are threefold. We recommend that the timeframes in the environmental impact assessment regulations are lengthened and that some flexibility are built into those timeframes to give especially communities time to process very complex environmental information and to express their views. We also propose that public participation must be compulsory for all water use license applications and that the principles of a free, prior and informed consent must be a requirement for granting mining rights in respect of land on which is occupied by communities. Thank you very much for your time and thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Good afternoon to the panel and good afternoon to fellow stakeholders and the members of the public. My name is Jean Bodenstein. I am the advocacy coordinator of the Rape Crisis Cape Town Trust and specifically the Rape Survivors Justice Campaign. Some of you might have seen the little purple booklets and the submission that we make today, and we've also made written submission, is on the implementation of the Sexual Offences Act, specifically relating to sexual offences courts. This submission is also endorsed by the Shukumisa campaign. Maybe I should start with a bit of context. So the crime statistics that was released in September 2016 showed that a number of 51,895 sexual offences were reported during the reporting period. We know from studies that there is a huge number of underreporting, and as one in every 13 sexual offences are actually reported. That means that more than 670 sexual offenses took place during the reporting period. We need to accelerate fundamental change to this high rates of rape, and we can do this through key legislation. Now, I will guide you through the relevant legislation and policy, and at the end make some recommendations of action steps that can be taken to address this. The Criminal Law Sexual Offences and Related Matters Amendment Act of 2007 came into effect in December that year. This law brought some very important changes to the sexual offences legislation. But unfortunately, it did not change the unacceptably high rates of rape, the serious underreporting, and the low conviction rates for sexual offences. And one of the main reasons is the barriers to reporting that exist. In 2013, the Ministerial Advisory Task Team on the Adjudication of Sexual Offences Matters released a report, which I will refer to as the Matso report. And in the report, they indicated that the main achievements for the initial sexual offences courts were high conviction rate in sexual offences cases, a decrease in turnaround time when cases are resolved and finalized, and lastly, less secondary trauma for sexual offences survivors, mainly due to support in these courts, and specifically court supporters and a supportive criminal justice system. In 2013, later that year, Minister Gadebe, the then Minister of Justice, promised to roll out these sexual offences courts, and to do that with specialized infrastructure, so waiting rooms and buildings, and really ways to support the survivor through the system, specialized personnel, and also specialized services. This led to the Judicial Matters Amendment Act of 2013, which was drafted to insert Section 55A into the Sexual Offences Act. And this section was then designed to specifically authorize the designation of certain courts by the Minister of Justice to exclusively deal with sexual offences. It was further supported by the insertion of Section 66, which was aimed to make sure that various government departments provide directives on how they would deal with sexual offences matters. Unfortunately, this Judicial Matters Amendment Act has not come into effect yet, which means that Section 55A is not part of the law yet. Further, the second Judicial Matters Amendment Act of 2016 now aims to do away with the exclusivity clause. And this clearly shows a lack of commitment to these courts, and more specifically to the sexual offences survivors that they are supposed to serve. Looking at the assessment of the implementation of the legislation, the promise from the Department of Justice was to roll out an initial 57 of these courts in the first 3 years after the promise was made. Now, almost 4 years later, only 49 of these courts exist. Nationally, around 298 courts hear mostly sexual offences, but they are not sexual offences courts because they do not provide the specialized infrastructure, specialized personnel, or specialized services. Furthermore, draft regulations of the Act has been sent out for input already in 2015, but no final version has been published. When we have to identify gaps, we look at the Judicial Matters Amendment Act of 2013 not having come into effect yet. No final regulations have been passed. Only 49 sexual offences courts exist across the country. And there's no guarantee that they actually do provide specialized infrastructure, personnel, and services. There's no clear plan for the rollout of sexual offences courts. And most survivors still do not have access to a victim-centered justice system. They still experience a lack of support, lack of information, and often withdraw their cases as a result. We would therefore like to propose the 3 following action steps. Firstly, Section 55A must be operationalized by March 2017. Secondly, the regulations must be operationalized and finalized. And thirdly, we want to see a publicly funded plan for a 10-year period for the rollout of sexual offences courts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please. You can come forward, please. You're the one who's next. And I realize that those of you, also the person who just spoke, Jean, as well as the rest of you are maybe focusing on women's issues or gender, so you will have a little bit more time. Thanks.
Good day, everyone. Greetings, esteemed panel. This is a joint submission made by Gender Dynamics, which is a non-governmental organization, as well as the Legal Resources Center. Gender Dynamics is a human rights organization that seeks to promote and enhance the human rights of the transgender and gender non-conforming communities. And on the other hand, the Legal Resources Center is an organization that seeks to provide legal law. What? Can you just introduce yourself there? Okay.
And I'm Manjum Darikwa. I'm an attorney at the Legal Resources Center. We are a law clinic that uses law as an instrument of justice for poor and marginalized persons who would normally not be able to afford the legal services of lawyers.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Mandy, and apologies again. So with regards to our submission, it will entail us speaking around the challenges in implementation of the Alteration of Sex Description and Sex Status Act. Many transgender and gender non-conforming people continues to bear the brunt of social stigma, prejudice, discrimination, hate, and violence. One of the incidences that I would personally like to reflect on, which happened actually here today, was when you step into a space such as the toilet and you are questioned for your gender identity and how you express your gender. I think that is one of the ways in which violence takes place within our community, and one of the ways in which we need to address it is to start talking about it. Gender non-conforming people and transgender people seek the same services as any other South African living in this country, any person living in this country. Our rights are protected. Sexual orientation. However, I do want to appeal in terms of our understanding around issues of gender and sexuality, that we do not confuse sexual orientation with gender identity. And in the context of this piece of legislation that we will be discussing today, the focus is on gender identity. So I now give over to my colleague, Mandy.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenton. So as Glenton has mentioned, at the Legal Resources Center, we've been offering services to transgender and intersex persons as a group of persons that are generally marginalized and vulnerable, in the sense that the services are not always available to them. And our presentation today is going to specifically focus on the Alteration of Sex Description Act and Sex Status 849 of 2003, which is the legislation that allows a transgender or intersex person to alter their sex description on their identity document or birth certificate. So as you know, when a person is born, it is mandatory for the person's sex to be registered on the birth certificate as male or female. So for a transgender person, as Glenton has experienced, their lived experience of their gender sex is not the one that is registered on their birth certificate or their identity document. So once they've transitioned from one sex to the other, this legislation allows them to be able to legally change that record legislation before the alteration can be done. So the Act allows you to alter that aspect of your identity document and your birth certificate as long as you comply with the requirements set out in the Act. And the Act requires a birth certificate, 2 letters from a doctor that confirms that you've been receiving either surgical treatment or medical treatment, or that your sexual characteristics have evolved through the natural course of evolvement. And then for intersex persons, is that you've lived in a specific gender for a period of 2 years. Once you've met all these requirements, you then go to Home Affairs as the department of government that is responsible for implementing this act. You then hand over the birth certificate as well as the 2 letters from the doctor for you to formally apply for your identification document to be altered. So it sounds very simple, but unfortunately, in reality, the lived experiences of people going to Home Affairs has not been that simple and has not been easy. So what I'm going to just highlight very briefly for you, the panel, is the substantive issues that the legislation has, as well as the procedural issues in the implementation of the legislation. So I think the main issue with the substance is that it's a doctor that has to say whether or not you're a woman or you're a man. It's not your experience of your gender or sex that you are emphasizing yourself, but you have to go to a doctor who then has to examine you to confirm whether you're a man or a woman. We submit that this is contrary to the rights set out in the Constitution that gives everyone the right to dignity, everyone the right to bodily integrity, everyone the right to equality, among other rights set out in the Bill of Rights. We believe that the expression and experience of gender identity is an individualized experience, and the legal framework must allow anyone who is experiencing their gender identity to be able to express it without putting a condition of a doctor being able to say you are a female or you're male. Mostly because of, in addition to the rights, access to medical practitioners is not simple. It's not easy for people, especially in rural areas or in marginalized communities where there are not healthcare facilities available. It becomes difficult for them to be able to get the doctors themselves to be able to give them these letters to confirm the transition. And on the procedural side, the Act itself does not have regulations. It does not have directives that can be implemented in ensuring that the promise of the Act is made a reality to all transgender and intersex persons. So what happens is sometimes when people report to Home Affairs, it's not always clear exactly what the procedure is because there's no directive or regulation that can be clearly followed when a person comes to Home Affairs to apply. Secondly, the knowledge about the Act itself is quite lacking for a lot of the frontline staff members that receive people that go to Home Affairs to apply. And then thirdly, the timeline that it takes for a person to apply and successfully get their identification altered also takes too long. So I think we have to remember that an identity document that is reflective of your identity is very important in a day-to-day existence in South Africa. You need it for voting, you need it to draw money in the bank, you need it to be able to drive legally, you need it to be able to shop in a Edgar's, in a Woolworths, you need it pretty much to go to university, to go anything where you have to show a picture identity document, you have to show your ID. So if your lived experience of your gender is different from the identification document that you have, then a lot of people are arrested for fraud. They are also arrested for impersonation of people. So it becomes very difficult and clearly then becomes discriminatory and violates transgender and intersex persons' rights that this Act, when it was enacted in 2003, was aimed to protect. So our key recommendation, we've done a written submission. We've also done a little booklet that explains all these things in a little bit more detail. I will make it available to to the key people that are receiving information, because I think it's quite detailed for me to present it now. It would take too much time, and there are more people that have to present. But I will make sure that it's received so that it gives, there are more details and the nuances about the problems being implemented, the problems being faced about the implementation of this act. But for now, I would like to just emphasize that the training of frontline staff members that are processing applications for alteration of sex description at Home Affairs must be done immediately to ensure that when people come and say, I want to apply for alteration, there's no issues relating to, I don't know about this act, I don't know how to implement it. Secondly, there needs to be regulations and directives that are put in place that clearly stipulate the timelines, what is required, and who, if you want to follow up, who is responsible for what, how long it takes, and all of that. And then thirdly, there needs to be some form of reform that starts looking at expressions of gender identity in South Africa, and whether or not we want to medically always go to doctors to say, tell me what I am, tell me if I'm female, tell me if I'm male, when the experience of the identity itself is individualized. Because your experience of your identity doesn't have to be confirmed by another person. The promise of the Constitution is that we're all free people, we're all individual people, we all have equality, we all have dignity, we all have bodily integrity. So what that means is that you should be able to experience and live your identity without someone else having to confirm your identity. And with that, thank you very much. With a minute to spare.
Thank you. Next, Women Legal Resources Center. Just introduce yourself.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to the panel, and thank you very much for asking us to come and substantiate the written submissions that we have made. My name is Charlene May. I'm an attorney. I work for an organization called the Legal Resources Center. I'm based in Cape Town. And my colleague next to me is Siam Samai. She is the director of an organization called the Women's Legal Center, and they too are based in Cape Town. I want to start off the presentation here today by simply saying that we are mindful that we are addressing the committee in this audience during 16 days of activism, and within the same week where the media has reported the brutal killing of a lesbian woman in Driftsand in Khayelitsha. In the same vein, we acknowledge the progress that has been made in legislative development in respect of gender equality and gender-based violence in South Africa as a whole. Our submissions focus specifically on the implementation of the Domestic Violence Act, and there has been some reference to the legislation earlier this morning. We want to reflect on the preamble of the legislation, which states that it is the purpose of the Act to afford the victims of domestic violence the maximum protection from domestic abuse that the law can provide, and to introduce measures which seek to ensure that the relevant organs of state give full effect to the provisions of this Act, and thereby to convey that the state is committed to elimination of domestic violence. To us, discrimination and equality are so matched together that you can't begin to talk about discrimination without talking about equality, because they are interlinked. And interlinked with discrimination and equality is poverty. Poverty, particularly inequality in distribution of assets and related stresses, have been identified as contributors to the high levels of violence that we experience within our communities, our households, and within our countries. Every year, we have new research reports that indicate an increased level of gender-based violence within our society. Just last week, Sonke Gender Justice released their report on gender-based violence in Diepsloot in Gauteng. Both the Legal Resources Center as well as the Women's Legal Center see survivors of domestic violence on a weekly basis, as we offer support and legal assistance to women as they try and obtain protection orders through our justice system. We anticipate within the coming festive season that we will see an increase in the amount of women that will come walking through our doors for assistance. The increase in reports will have a ripple effect throughout the justice system that has been designed by the Act and which have been implemented in a haphazard manner almost from the inception of the legislation. Women within our society continue to bear the brunt of non-implementation of the Domestic Violence Act. They are more often abused by someone whom they share a domestic relationship. They therefore endure the double jeopardy and the double prejudice of abuse and violence at the hands of their abuser, but as well as the inability of the government through the South African police to respond to the violence that they suffer. Over a number of years, our two organizations have been asked to brief the Portfolio Committee on Police on the South African Police's implementation of the Domestic Violence Act. Over the past years, the following have been reoccurring failures that we have reported to that committee. There's been a failure to arrest the abuser where there's a threat of imminent harm, a failure to inform victims of their rights, a failure to keep proper records of domestic violence incidents and protection orders that they have on file. There's a failure to serve protection orders and a failure to respond to a call for assistance or the dispatching of a vehicle if a victim reports that it is an incident of domestic violence. The South African police are often the first interaction or engagement that women will have with the justice system. They become the public face of government's commitment to address and eradicate gender-based violence. There must therefore be a commitment within the highest ranks to address and meet these obligations. There has been non-compliance with reporting frameworks that have been set out in the Act by the National Police Commissioner over a very long period of time. And so these reports that have been required by Parliament have simply not been provided or have been provided in large chunks so as not to allow for proper analysis by civil society organizations or by members of Parliament themselves. And because we didn't simply want to list all of the negative things in respect of the legislation, we also wanted to make some recommendations. I'm going to pass over to Siam.
Thank you. I will be addressing now just 3 or 4 recommendations that we are making in terms of the Domestic Violence Act. To the panel, we are saying that the national instructions were issued in 1999 when the Act first came into effect. They are outdated in terms of standard operating procedures and in need of a review by the National Police Commissioner. We are saying that when things don't work, we must review and introduce new and different strategies. The Act in its entirety, we are also saying, is in need of review and possible amendment. The legislation does not deal with counseling or mediation and therefore provides no service that speaks to future prevention or addressing the cycle of abuse that is present. We strongly suggest that such an element be introduced to show government's commitment to addressing gender-based violence in a non-punitive manner. Service of documents has since the inception been problematic. We have a system that relies on the victim to serve a protection order on the very person who abuses her. A system that requires a poverty-stricken woman to pay the sheriff of the court to effect service on her abuser. And a system which relies on a reluctant SAPS official to service documents which they believe is not part of their core mandate. And I think that this provision of the services of court orders need to be strengthened within the Domestic Violence Act. We submit that we cannot move forward as a country and a community if we don't address the violence that women are subjected to on a daily basis in our country. We cannot rely on the current system that we have in place, and new and creative methods need to be introduced at the legislative and policy level to address violence against women. Both the Women Legal Center and the Legal Resource Center have made written submissions, and we've addressed more issues within those submissions. These are the 3 key points that we want the panel to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Shyam and Charlene. Thank you also for those particular, very relevant, to the point presentations from the previous speaker, around specific legislation and specific recommendations. Just again to make clear that if you have a submission, you can give it to the table at the back where they're raising their hands between the two banners. Make your voice heard. Even if you're not making a written submission, you just want to put what you have on paper or what you want to say, you could give it to them. Then also there's the hashtag high-level panel. And there's also the email address, the highlevelpanel@parliament.gov.za, as well as a Facebook page that I don't know exactly the Facebook page, but there's definitely all the social media as well as other relevant ways that you can engage. So over to the next group, Andrea van der Ros. Andrea van der Ros? Not here. Oh. Then also, from the Agricultural Workers Union. And then we still like to give you from the floor. So we've got about half an hour for the rest of those of you who've asked to speak. So I'm really going to be hard on time with you. Carlo Didrich, you're going to make a presentation. Garcia, going to make a presentation from South African United Fishing Front. And then Reverend Greg Fick, you'll make a presentation. Haroldine Chienda, not here. Griffiths from Abbotsdale, I think he made a presentation yesterday. Excuse me? Yesterday, so that's good, thank you. Anele Nkitana. Anele? Not. Anele? No. Okay, let's take those. You have 3 minutes.
Good day, panel members, Comrade Chairperson, Program Director, and all stakeholders present here today. Thank you for the opportunity. I would like to thank the panel for the opportunity to raise some issues. As I am from a trade union, Bahusa, who is a trade union in the agricultural sector. After 22 years, it's very sad and unfortunate to see that there is still challenges that our people is facing in the agricultural sector, especially in the Western Cape, but also in most parts of South Africa. Our challenges are, there is a lack of shared vision by stakeholders and role players in the agricultural sector. The economy in the agricultural sector is racially skewed and only advances a specific population group as a legacy remnant of the apartheid era. The social pathologies such as poor health, alcohol abuse remain, as well as poor housing, unemployment, worker living conditions, illiteracy, and a lack of specialized skills. Redressing and de-racializing the economy while at the same time redressing social justice are the biggest challenges in the agricultural sector. And as a trade union in the agricultural sector, I want to talk specifically about evictions. Our people are facing illegal and legal evictions on a daily basis. Farmers evict our people to use the houses as storage facilities, and most of the times these evictions took place during the winter time, in spite that we got an act called ESTA. When our people are evicted, and people talk about alternative accommodation, we as trade unions don't understand how can local municipalities build us, our people, a shack when some of our farm workers live in a 3-bedroom house on the farm. But once he's evicted, and people talk about alternative accommodation, local municipalities go and build a SEC. They are actually building squatter camps for our people. PAHUSA is calling again on government to put measures in place and also to place a moratorium on evictions until such time that local municipalities can provide decent housing for our people. Other challenges in labor that we experience as a trade union is a lack of recognition of agriculture, recognition for agricultural trade unions, education, training, and development, and also labor's 21 demands not achieved. And I just would like to refresh the panel on what were the 21 strike demands in 2012 when the farm workers went on strike. It's freedom of association, stopping of anti-union activity, and granting of unified organizational rights regime. Labor demand a minimum wage of $150 per day, 8 working hour day. Full maternity benefits for all workers, including seasonal workers. End to wage discrimination and the principle of equal pay for equal work to be introduced. 40 hours a week for farm workers. The introduction of job grading and pay scales for all workers. That a provident fund be set up for all farm workers. The setting up of a bargaining statutory council in the agricultural sector. A ban on the use of labor brokers, as this form of employment undermines the regulatory framework of farm workers' employment conditions. That a seasonal worker desk be set up by the Department of Labor that keeps a database, track and service seasonal workers' needs, i.e. to be registered for UIF and be granted permanent seasonal worker status. The setting up of an inter-ministerial committee and define the role of agricultural sector in NEDLAC that specifically look at farm worker and dweller issues, and that a fund be set up to support activities of unions towards unionization in the sector. That all housing contracts are entered into with both partners' names, and that women in particular have rights to tenure in the event of a spouse or partner passing on or losing his job. No deduction for rent of siblings and dependents over 18 years. Moratorium on all evictions. Safe and decent farm worker transport for farm workers to and from work in town. No deductions for domestic water and electricity usage, including gardening. That a child grant be made accessible for farm worker communities. Create a fund to assist with alcohol and substance abuse, fetal alcohol syndrome, and gender-based violence. Access to farms related to social needs of farm worker families. Free accessible health care for farm workers. And last one, transformation and structural change be brought about in the agricultural sector speedily. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, please.
Program Director, ladies and gentlemen of the panel, thank you very much for this opportunity. My fellow South Africans, my name is Pedro Garcia. I'm with an organization called the South African United Fishing Front, and we deal with fishermen throughout South Africa. We also deal on an African level with the African Union, with NEPAD, African Union, Inter-African Bureau of Africa of Animal Resources, the FAO, of the United Nations, and other leading agencies, international agencies, dealing with fisheries and aquaculture. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure that most of you are aware of what is happening in the industry, especially with the small-scale fishers. We have one law, that is the Marine Living Resources Act, which was amended to make provision for the small-scale fishers who were excluded from the processes for many, many years, without any valid reason being given to our people. Now, many of the issues that were brought up here affects our people directly. When I say our people, I'm talking about fisher folk throughout South Africa. And yet, after 22 years in a new dispensation, we have the unenviable reputation of being the most unequal country in the world. What has that got to do with fishing? Everything. When we have one big fishing company, just one of the big fishing companies, who declare turnover of 8 billion rand plus and operational profits of 1.7 billion rand from resources that they acquire from the state. And we have tens of thousands of people along our coastline who are going to bed hungry at night, who are fighting for the rights, traditional, ancestral, historical fishing rights, then we have a problem in our country. How can we be so divided? How can we stand as South Africans? Our moral compass is completely screwed up. We need to stand with our people and we need to fix things in our country. I would like to make 2 recommendations here today. One of those recommendations is not about the law. It's what happens after the law has been enacted. How many of our people are aware of the laws? How many of them understand the laws? The problem that we experience in South Africa is a problem of grassroots consultation processes. Government tends to steamroll processes through our communities. In a flash they're in a flash they're out. Tomorrow after tomorrow, you hear this law has been enacted, that law has been enacted, but you never understood it. We move too fast in our country. We move so fast that we move right past our people, right around our people. We tend to forget that we're not a first world country. We have literacy and numeracy challenges. It is imperative that we put together a structure where we can talk about grassroots consultation processes. One of the earlier speakers spoke about informed and prior consent. As South Africa, as a nation, we are signatories to 2 very important documents. One is called the VGGTs, the Voluntary Guidelines for the Responsible Governance of Tenure in Fisheries, Forestry and Agriculture. Then there's another document that's called the Pan-African Fisheries and Aquaculture Policy Framework and Reform Strategy. Our president signed all those documents. But we haven't achieved those objectives. How do we achieve an objective of informed and prior consent? When we go into a community and you make a decision based on your understanding of what is happening. When you make that decision, that is an informed decision, but you've been informed, you've been educated, you've been capacitated. What we need in South Africa is to ensure that when government goes into our communities, that they take the local and human dynamics into account. If it means that you have to go in with a comic strip, if it means you have to go in with a video recording, if it means you have to go in and do oral presentations in order for our people to understand, then that is what you do. You don't fast-track processes. As much as we need to fast-track transformation in this country, we need to be cautious about it as well, because we'll move past our people once again. And that is where the exploitation comes in. And the sharks are sitting, they are waiting there for us. They are waiting for these policies to move through. How, for heaven's sake, in the fishing industry, I refer to the fishing industry because that is where I come from. Do you expect a normal fisherman to first of all understand a policy that has no substance or content, and it's a huge document? He has an implementation plan that's 144 pages long. He has the permit conditions he has to adhere to. All of these documents, the normal fisherman has to understand before he's accepted as a fisherman. He's been fishing all his life, for generations, as a matter of fact. So that is our recommendation, that we address that particular issue, because if we address that issue, a lot of our problems will be resolved. We need to build capacity. There are 3 pillars on which this country needs to be built. The first one is education. The second one is education. The third one is education. We need to educate our people. And then just finally. Thank you. We need to look at a legal and regulatory framework to address corruption and related activities in an effective manner. We did a presentation to the Portfolio Committee on the 25th of this month, and in that presentation, we alleged capture of state fisheries. Because our government still panders to the elite and the big businessmen. So how can it not be a form of capture of state fisheries? And these are the issues we need to address. We need to make it clear. We've had 2 reports, forensic audits, Emang Basadi, Harris Newpen, which concluded that there was political interference, maladministration. The same people are still in the offices after years. When are we going to do the right thing? When? I thank you.
Unfortunately, we have limited time, so I can't give you more time. I had a bias, which I don't apologize for those who came on women's issues. But otherwise, we have limited time, so 3 minutes.
I greet you in the wonderful name of my Lord and Savior Jesus the Christ. My name is Greg Fick, and I represent 4 different organizations. I will try my best to speak from the heart, as the documentation here covers about 10 to 15 minutes. But as first, I want to thank our former president for this opportunity and for his presence, the panel. Thank you so much. And for you, the public, thank you for your presence. Discrimination in South Africa after 20 years living in a democratic country should be taboo. Yet we find in our day and our time that the very people that we have elected democratically to represent our people are the very people that discriminate against us. In 1950, the then President F.W. de Klerk, a previous speaker spoke of this, stated the following. Ek hou daarvan om hom in Afrikaans te gee. Hy sê die wetgewing van 1950 van artikel 30, die vir bevolkingsregistrasiewet, stel duidelik dat die woord kleerling in bestaan geroep was om die inheemse volk te beroof van hulle grondwettige reg tot die eienaarskap van hulle land. In ander woorde, wat probeer ek vir u sê, is dat die president F.W. de Klerk het tot die beseffing gekom dat die rede hoekom hierdie wet geroep was om die inheemse Khoisan, so-called colored people, te beroof van wat werklik deur God aan hulle gegee was. Nou is die probleem wat ek vandag mee sit, is dat ek het ook gewout vir 'n democratic elected government. Maar hierdie government wat vandag in bestaan is the very same government that is continuing with the apartheid regime, so-called, upon our people. And I want to speak to you, the public of South Africa, and say we can never allow it. Our President Nelson Mandela said the following words: if this government do to us what the apartheid regime did, then we must do to this government what we did to the apartheid regime. Wat soek kleerlingmerkies op government officials se vorms? Toe ek die polisie los in die jaar 2011, toe word ek nog steeds gesê, jy's nou uit die polisie uit as 'n kleerling polisieman. Wat soek die woord kleerling in die government van Suid-Afrika se bevolkingsgroepe se merkies vandag? This government is guilty of discriminating against the first indigenous people, so-called colored peoples. And it's high time that this government take responsibility for the actions that they have made. Let me speak to you about our pensioners. I was waiting for many years for this government to declare what is a living wage. Today we hear that the Deputy President ever so proudly state before us that 3,500 rand is not a living wage, but is a minimum wage. Nou, hoe verwacht die government dat ons elders, ons pensioners, moet leef met die peanuts wat hulle vir hulle gee? Our children have a future. But we cannot build upon the lies of the past. This country will continue with the curse that is upon it. The reason being, because you see, let me explain to you as I understand what happened during the apartheid time. Somebody came and stole from us. They took our identity, they took our land, they took our mothers, they took our sisters. Now they're coming to us, and this is what the ANC government have failed us. Because the ANC government say we must forgive and we must forget. But if you catch a thief, even if the thief say, I'm sorry, he must give back the cell phone that he robbed you from. But nothing like that happened in South Africa. And our people will never be free until we are economically liberated in this country. Poverty is a reality. And it is not a problem in the white community, colored community so-called, or in the black community. It is time that we realize it's a problem among all of us. Because certain people took our liberty, took our freedom and the right to vote to enrich themselves. And I say it's high time that we, the people, say no. No to corruption. No to whosoever he might be. If he's a king, if he's a prince, if he's a president, what's wrong is wrong and justice must prevail. First of all, I want to finish off with saying this. You have a vote, but what does it benefit you if you go and vote and get killed tomorrow? What does it benefit you, your vote, that your fathers and forefathers has died for, if you cannot even sleep in your own home? And if somebody breaks into your home and you take action, that you are more guilty than anybody else. This government needs to wake up to the reality of society, because they cannot close down a shebeen that's selling illegal drugs, but they can close down tuck shops. They cannot close down drug dens and sit in meetings. My God, how can this government do it? Sit in meetings with people that recommend themselves as gangster lords, drug lords, and have meetings with them. We have become gullible. Have our freedom not cost us the blood of our forefathers? Have this land not blood that is calling out to God? I say justice must prevail. And the only way justice will prevail is that we, the people, take back the authority that God has given us. Nelson Mandela was a great man, but in vain he has died. If this government continues with the discrimination upon our people, we are the Khoisan people, and the Deputy President, Minister, said the following words to Parliament: we cannot allow these people First Nation status, because we will have to give back what belongs to them. Nou ek sê vir u, meneer Minister, jy het erkenning gegee dat jy skelm is. Jy het erkenning gegee dat jy discriminate against the so-called colored people, Khoisan colored people. And it's time that you wake up and smell the roses before this country is cursed down to the drains. Let us take back what belongs to us. The Lord bless you.
I said I was going to give some people from the floor, but we still have people on the list. Unfortunately, the sister needs to leave, so I'll give an opportunity. Then we have the following. So I just wanted to check with you. Is Harold Dean Chienda? Not here. You here? Excuse me? Already? Thanks. Excuse me? I can't hear. You'll have to speak to the table. Then Sarah Fabi spoke yesterday. Okay. So Sarah, you will have an opportunity. Marlene Peterson. Not here. No, Zola. No, that was yesterday. Sandra Jafter. No. Lorraine Moko. She all spoke. Okay, so then we have our sister that will speak, and then you have an opportunity. You would like to speak? Okay. Then what we'll do is I will ask the sound people to put up a mic there. So those who are on the list who want to speak from the floor, you will have to line up there, and we'll give you 2 minutes. No, it's not my business. You will have to go to the table if you have a problem. To the table.
Programdirecteur, voormalige president en die hoë paneel. Almal wat teenwoordig is, groet ek vanmiddag. Ek wil net praat daar by groep 1, waar armoede van gepraat word. Die wet wat oumas verhoed om foster grants te ontvang, veroorsaak armoede. Oumas is verantwoordelik vir hulle kleinkinders se opvoeding teen alle tye. Hierdie wet veroorsaak dat baie kinders op straat beland, want die oumas kan nie vir hulle sorg nie. Byvoorbeeld, oumas wat nie werk nie, en daar's oumas wat nog nie pensioentoelaag ontvang nie, soos ek wat hier staan, hulle hande is afgekap om hulle hulp aan die kinders te bied. Die kinders raak betrokke in misdaad. Ek het 'n voorstel, laat hier die wet wat die oumas verhoed om foster grants te kry, laat dit toegelaat word, laat die oumas foster grants kan kry vir hulle kleinkinders. Want ek soos ek hier staan, ek is 'n ouma, ek het 'n kleinkind wat na 'n special needs school toe moet gaan, ek bly in Fuleni. Die kind moet Khayelitsha toe gaan en die transport is R500. Ek werk nie, ek kry nie 'n pensioentoelaag nie, so daai kind kan nie skool toe gaan nie. En daai kind gaan sien, ouma kry swaar en dan gaan hy na misdaad toe draai. Ek sal graag wil hê dat die paneel daardie wet, laat hulle kyk na daardie wet, want daardie wet veroorsaak dat daar meer kinders op straat is. Dankie.
Dankie, Sarah. No, yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to the panel. My name is Sarah Fabi. I'm from Chatsworth in Malmesbury. We're falling under the Swartland municipality. You know, I'm sitting with this booklet in front of me who's talking about social assistance. And if I look in this country, all the women who's 40 and past 40 is sitting at home, can't find any jobs. And my question to that is, if they are talking about social assistance, what happened to those women? Who's looking out for them? Because they are also mothers, they're also running a household. And if the child's in the house, there's no income from the mother's side, that child goes to the street because in my area, the majority of our families that stays there is mothers or single mothers and don't get any work, any assistance from social services. My other problem that I have in terms of social assistance, if I look at the social workers in our area in Malmesbury, you won't believe what is happening. Community workers is a social workers, because at the end of the day, you won't find a social worker in government side because you may have to go look for them. 24/7, we as community workers on grassroots level, we are handling cases where the mother is abusing the child, the mother is smoking out the money of the child. Then you as a community worker, you have to deal with those issues. And for me is that in terms of social assistance and the social grants that this government gave, government must seriously look into that, because it's not fair to that child or that mother who doesn't earn anything, or don't have food on the table, for her to sit with all these problems, and we're sitting with both acts that say that it's a Social Assistance Act. Then I have to come to the one that they call the Constitution. I have a serious problem with the country's Constitution. The Constitution is so far from the poor people. The Constitution is up there. The community people is down here on grassroots level. If you see a fight in the Constitution Court, you will see it's the political parties who fight each other. But you won't see the community issues and service deliveries is in that Constitution Court. But that Constitution Court is supposed to be there to look after the poorest of the poor. And that is something that is sick, because at the end of the day, the Constitution is there to look after the poorest of the poor. The other thing I have to talk about is the fact that we are talking about heritage.
1 minute.
Heritage for me, in South Africa, what did we inherit? We inherit only poverty. If you look around you, there's nobody that can say in the poorest communities and in rural areas they inherited something from their forefathers. The only thing that they was inheriting was poverty, nothing else. For me, that bill must also be looked at, because at the end of the day, I feel if the grandchild of the child, after the grandchild, if they grow up, they must say they inherited a factory, a shop, a piece of land. That is how we must empower our children. But the only thing that we inherited for our children, our grandchildren, is poverty. I thank you.
I'll give an opportunity now to the young man. After that, we'll have King Kuba Calvin Cornelius. And then I'll acknowledge those two of you. Yes, thank you. Just introduce yourself as well.
To the high-level panel of the legislation and of the acceleration. To the high-level panel on the assessment of the legislation and the acceleration of the fundamental change, and to the protocol, Molweni, Goeiedag, and in Mandarin Chinese, Daijia my name is Andile Junior Goba, and I'm 16 years of age. I attend this school called the Cape Academy for Mathematics, Science and Technology. I'm standing here and representing the ANC Youth League of Zone 5. I would like to thank the leaders, and especially the high-level panel. Thank you very much. My presentation is about Working Group 3. As per leaflet on page 2 says, it reads as follows: what divides us as South Africans is simply the undermining of one another. And due to the installed racial issue, which was influenced during the strong apartheid regime, what binds us as South Africans is when capitalists see financial advantage, financial opportunity, when, for example, when like Cricket World Cup happens and Rugby World Cups happen, and that's when we only bond with one another as South Africans. That's what I've noticed as a South African. This includes inequality and discrimination. that we experience in this province. As a 16-year-old child, I've experienced racial discrimination daily between whites, coloreds, and blacks. And I would sometimes wonder and ask myself, as a democratic society, why am I still experiencing this? Or why is this happening in this democratic society? We live in a society where discrimination still exists, but in a different degree. Non-black people still view us black people as gaffers. And they feel superior because of their skin color and their language. We have allowed emotional bullying because as some of us do not have confidence within ourselves, as it was not installed within us by our parents. And we are addressed as the third-class citizens in our own country. Tribalism, as it is caused by a minority who always use the tool of divide and rule. As a young South African, we must not allow this in any sort to happen in South Africa, as we are the only African country that has not yet been affected by this Tribalism Act. Most of our African countries are affected by this Tribalism Act. They failed to anticipate that the capitalists who wanted to gain wealth of their country actually cause a conflict between them in order to gain power of their country. Social and economical exclusion. We come from different backgrounds, and majority of black people are rich enough to afford certain lifestyle like many of our peers from other racial groups, and that creates inferiority to us black children and colored children. We are unable to reach our full potential because our parents, who do not have financial stability for careers we want to pursue. For example, I want to become a gynecologist, but I am aware of the fact that my mother will not be able to support me, support my studies during university studies. And what I've noticed is that a lot of our white mates or peers actually have a sponsor whilst they're schooling for their career that they want to pursue, let's say in university. Redressing and transformation. We need our government to take control of our media and filming broadcasting. We are not informed of our history and roots as people, blacks and coloreds. A dialogue and documentaries need to be broadcasted to restore custom and pride of our people. This will be a way forward to break the inferiority. This included will also help make other people understand each other's history and all of that. We need informative broadcasting on current situations of our economy and the influence of South Africa has in the international trade market. In this way, we will have the confidence and encouragement to invest in our education and skills development. We do not engage in these topics because the information is not addressed in our platforms. A perfect example of this act is China. I would always watch the Chinese channel, which is 447, and I would observe how do they advertise, how they encourage their people, and how they gain economic strength. And they do that by only displaying positive things. What I've noticed, they never advertise alcohol, which is the main problem, one of the main problems in our squatter camps and our ghettos. They also display positive things like education, how they should be in class. If you actually watch this, you'll realize that they are using that they're going as far as possible to make the people realize the good within their country.
1 minute.
And as people of South Africa, this refers to Act 14 of 2002 Media Development and Diversity Agency and Act 65 of 1965 Film and Publication. That the division in South Africa is influenced by inequality and unfair advantage of power. The minority still has economical advantage after 21 years of democracy. To redress this issue, we need economical equality, the minerals, and the agriculture. South Africans needs to invest into small businesses, vendors, in partnership with the immigrants to create an economical advantaged country. The country will be able to progress while in other social problems such as poverty and crime. United in the 21st century, I believe South African youth have the potential to lead the earth. Ignorance will hinder our success. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate your presentation, also referring to specific legislation. That's really welcoming. Thank you very much for that. You have 3 minutes.
Try says. What you do? I have greeted you in my mother tongue. My name is Gaub, which means King Kuba Calvin Cornelius III. I am the head of the royal house of the Khoisan nation. I am the firstborn child for 16 generations dating back till 1695. I am the oldest king in South Africa. The Deputy Minister had a press release a few days ago. And one of my advisors drafted this document and says, please, you need to read out a reply to the Deputy Minister of Traditional Affairs and the Director General. So, reply to the City Press on the 27th of the 11th, 2016, First Nation status for the Khoisan unsustainable. The press recently reported that the Deputy Minister, Obed Papela, an alleged black South African, has recently proclaimed himself to be the national scientific expert on the Aboriginal nations of South Africa. His public statement concerning the First Nation status of the Khoisan is a tissue of misrepresentation. It is clear, and not only is he ignorant, but he knows absolutely nothing about the Aboriginal peoples of South Africa, including the Khoisan. The Deputy Minister has determined that without adequate historical or ethnographic research, the government may arbitrarily decide who is a Khoisan leader, who is not a Khoisan leader, who the government's favorites are for the Khoisan leadership, and who the government detests as a matter of leadership capacity. This initiative is such a convoluted expression of government policy, and it completely ignores the fact that the Khoisan had a system of customary law which facilitates the determination of traditional leaders and additionally determines the endurance of the traditional leadership by the processes of community acceptance. This initiative on the part of the government is nothing other than an old-fashioned colonialism with emphasis on dividing the Khoisan nation in order to rule them separately. The Deputy Minister makes the grievous assumption that should the Khoisan be recognized for the fact that they are the first nation of South Africa, that the Khoisan would instantly declare their right to self-determination and independence from the South African state. The Deputy Minister obviously has a fertile imagination, because certainly there is no such, nor evidence of such an initiative in the entire Khoisan nation. The Khoisan are South Africans. They are the first nation of South Africa. They feel proud about the fact that they are the first nation of South Africa. And they do not need a mediocre an ignorant deputy minister to diminish their right to South African citizenship without any inequality and without any racial discrimination. The deputy minister then makes a comparison with the First Nations in North America and Latin America. The deputy minister knows absolutely nothing about First Nation status in Latin America, and he should be ashamed of the guesswork he has introduced into this discourse. Let us give him an example. The First Nation of Ecuador is the Shuar Nation of the Amazonian in Ecuador. The Shuar Nation are a part of the state of Ecuador, and every member of the Shuar Nation is a citizen of Ecuador. Under the constitutional system of Ecuador, the Shuar are given certain autonomy over certain matters that are exclusive to their form of living and governance. This does not mean that the Shuar Nation are less Ecuadorian than anyone else. It is possible that distinctive features of their culture can be given the form of derivative constitutional status to respect their right to self-determination and autonomy in their internal governance. The Honourable Deputy Minister says that no determination can be about First Nation status of the Khoisan because he's not certain how the migratory patterns actually evolved in South Africa. The Deputy Minister is completely ignorant even of the South African history. In this, he is a representative of the most shameful aspect of the current system governance of South Africa. Essentially, what he is trying to say is that the Khoisan, who fought for 200 years for their status and their freedom, who were subject to genocide, forced labor, and slavery, are now to be deprived of the right which they fought for over 200 years. The Deputy Minister needs to go back to primary school to learn a little more about his own country's history, because he certainly is not a representative of what this culture has provided in terms of the history of South Africa or the nation of Khoisan. The South African state is formulated around the Constitution. It would be very helpful if the Director General, Musumani Charles Nwala, had the barest take of what the Constitution does. For his information, the Constitution is nothing other than an instrument to allocate competence to the various groups that constitute the nation state, and the Constitution may carve out rights for minorities, it may carve out rights for majorities, it may carve out rights for businessmen, labor, whatever. The Constitution is a way of dividing up the power and competence in a society to make it run smoothly and fairly. The fact that the Khoisan are recognized as the Khoisan have a stake in the voice that governs them and can put their demands on the table for what it is in the best interest of the Khoisan for their culture, their development, and their contribution to South Africa as a whole. It is pathetic that the Director General has virtually no concept of what the Constitution is, and it's pathetic that South Africa should put people with this in portfolios of such importance.
1 minute.
When we can cut through the verbiage of the Deputy Minister and DG, what he represents is nothing but xenophobic racism, which targets a victim, and that victim is the Khoisan nation of South Africa. It is clear to us that historical evidence demonstrates without ambiguity that the Khoisan nation is the first nation in Southern Africa. Therefore, the efforts on the part of the government of South Africa to deny First Nation status is effectually a position denied to deprive them of their fundamental rights to which they are entitled to under international law. It should be noted that the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People is based on pre-existing documents approved by the United Nations, and these documents reflect the treaty laws governing the Bill of Rights, and because the Declaration is also based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Most of its previous provisions, regardless of what South Africa says, already has the status of customary international law and already binding in South Africa. The critical question is, why is South Africa in such denial of an obvious fact? And the answer is very simple: racism, black racism. The only reason that the Deputy Minister says that recognition of the First Nation status for the Khoisan is unsustainable is because he believes that the black majority would resist on racial grounds the recognition of the Khoisan who was here before them. This from the Royal House of the Khoisan Nations Advisor on International Law, Professor Winston Nagin, an expert on international and indigenous human rights. I thank you.
Thank you, Excellency. I just wanted to check. I just wanted to check if Patience Lunica is still here. Ah, thank you. Patience, you will have to, if the support staff can help us so that she would be able to either speak from down. You must let us know what is the best. You'd like to come up? Yes? Okay. So, but
Good day, all of my fellow South Africans and the esteemed high panel. Thank you for the opportunity that I can voice our burning issue. My name is Marlene Karelse, and I am from an organization called Moms Move for Justice and the AAF, which is the Al-Qaeda Andrews Foundation in Hanover Park. If we look at, in our booklets, we have South African Human Rights Commission Act 40 of 2013, and I've highlighted a piece. It says, the Constitution 1996 provides that the South African Human Rights Commission must promote, protect, develop, assess, and monitor human rights in South Africa. And I also want to say that colored lives matters. Now, if we look in Hanover Park, the community that I come from, in the last year, 114 young men were killed. Now, Moms Move for Justice is the moms of those deceased that came together because they couldn't get through to SAPS, which is Philippia Police Station. They couldn't get, the cases either get lost or dockets get stolen or just get thrown out of court, and the perpetrators are still living in our community. And we want to know why in Hanover Park there's only 2 police vans, and we have a high crime rate, which is gangsterism and the drug lords. Our community lives so much in fear that they can't go to the police and report. There are some policemen that are really working with us, but Philippi Police Station, they handle Hanover Park, which is a very big community, and Philippi Farms. And we would like to know that why is it that we only have 2 vans for those 2 places? How is this possible? It may sound to a joke to people, but it isn't. When you're outside and the children are throwing stones and you're trying to get the police to come in, no van can come out because they're in Philippi, on the farms, or they're elsewhere in Hanover Park. Our burning issue is that the panel should take a look at what happens. Why is there so much corruption in our police? You know, there are some good policemen, but why is it that the policeman is, I would literally say, in bed with the drug lord? How is it possible that hulle kan skit, hulle kan nie shopping skit, maar dan is hulle chommy met die drug lords? You know, en by die einde van die dag, dan moet onze mans en hy vaderless kinders verby die perpetrators loop. Our burning issue is that our panel come to Hanover Park, come to the level of the people, any community. We've got a lot of burning issues. Come take one day, come walk around and see what needs to be changed. We can talk about it here, but it's up to you guys that makes the legislation. Come one day, I invite you one day, pick any community and walk with us. Then I think you'll have a better understanding of what is happening and what needs to be done to change our communities.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'll now introduce Patience Lunica. She's from the Institute for Advancement of Disabled, and we apologize once again for the access, and I hope one can also appeal to these people, church, that they would look at especially access to the stage for all people, differently abled people. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name is Patience Unika. Okay, my organization basically, it focuses on poor service delivery for people with disability, mainly kids that are still in school. One of the things that we have a problem with is the early childhood development. We feel that there should be creches that includes kids with disability so that they could start there with integration and not want to integrate kids with disability when they are older, when they're in high school or at a later stage in primary school, because that makes the child feel discriminated against, because people do not accept what they don't know. If you are not familiar with something, of course you will act differently to it. And also, the teachers in those schools, they are not equipped to be working with people with disabilities. So we would like that the teachers get to be taught about different types of disabilities and also how to handle a child with a disability. Mainly, especially the kids with learning disability, the teachers will just pass a child from class to class until the child sees that and feel that they're stupid and they cannot perform in school. And that leads the child to being a dropout of school. And also, when it comes to transportation for us is a huge problem, because we have dial-a-ride who is useless to us. You will see them having one person and they will tell you, we're fully booked. And also accessibilities, especially government facilities. It is not disability friendly. You find that most places they have stairs, and yet they want you to attend these things. And with the people also in government that are doing these things for people with disability, you find that they know nothing about disability, but yet they want to, they have these constitutions about us people with disability. Now, our slogan goes like, nothing about us without us. So we would like to be included in every decision that is made for us, about us, because even the ramps that are built in certain places, I can't even go up and I can use my arms. What more? How much more for a person who cannot use their arms? And we would also like to urge the government to kindly build centers for us so that we could have, for those who are not intellectually privileged, to be able to do things with their hands, and they can provide jobs for themselves, so that those who can work and those who can provide their own jobs can give off their grant to those who cannot do anything for themselves, so that grant could assist them instead of them earning that 1.5, and then it still needs to cater for the person and the person that's looking after you, because it is indeed very expensive living with a disability, because we've got special needs, as you all know. Lastly, if the government could assist us to open co-ops so that we can be able to sustain ourselves instead of wanting handouts and busy writing letters to ask for funding. If we can have our own co-ops and generate our own funding, we can assist each other. Thank you.
Thank you. We've almost come to the end of the day. Thank you for your patience and for staying with us. Yesterday we had quite a number of people who also made presentations from the floor. So we've got 15 minutes left. So we just want to give 4 people a chance. If you can line up there, right there, you have 2 minutes each. And please, just those 5 first. And there's already 3 men in front. I'll give another woman a chance. So can we get, or a young person? Okay. 2 minutes.
Hello, thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and to the panel, the chairperson, everyone present. I want to say we appreciate this opportunity. My name is Kevin Momberg. I am from the Cape Town Minstrel Carnival Association here in Cape Town, and our concern that we are addressing is the social cohesion. And this concern really is that of the city of Cape Town, which obviously can spread throughout the country. But what they are doing is they are using their policies to cause conflict and favoritism amongst organizations who practice the same programs. This must not be allowed because it is unfair and gives the city an advantage on the voter population in the city. The examples we want to make is that when we attended the 103rd birthday of the ANC in 2015 on the 10th of February, the city interdicted us on the 12th because we attended that function and we couldn't do our parade on the 14th. In fact, the city even forced us to move our event on the same day as the ANC's birthday. We refused this and then followed a host of hostile issues against us. They started in the media that they stated in the media that they have allocated 4 million to organization for our programs and that type of thing because we are a non-profit organization. But then we were officially informed that they gave this money to their favorite organizations and we don't get 1 cent, and that is how they abuse their power. They also use their venues and in the same manner and a lot of other issues. So that's why we're asking that the local government policies, the process and the content of that should really be taken in review and looked at by the national government. I thank you.
Thank you for setting a good example with your time. Next, please. And then we'll give 2 women a chance.
Good afternoon, goeiemiddag. Ek is Gerald Solier. Ek verteenwoordig KMI, Kingdom Ministries International. Ek wil net vanmiddag 'n pleidooi doen dat u het gehoor vir die afgelope 2 dae wat ons mense se behoeftes en wat ons oproepe en beroepe is. Ek het gehoor 'n jong man van 16 vandag wat nie deel gewees het van apartheid nie, maar hy het ook nog steeds die grievances en die situasie waar ons in leef. Ek wil vanmiddag vir u, gistermiddag het iemand 'n skrif uit Psalm 24 het hy gelees wat hy gesê dat die grond en alles behoort aan God. En ek sien dat u is 'n eerwaarde en ek glo dat u sal ook ernstig ag neem op wat ons praat. Sonder God kan ons absoluut niks doen nie. En ek dink ons land moet weer eens terugkeer na God toe, sodat ons regering en ons mense in vrede en in harmonie kan leef. Want sonder God se vrede sal hierdie land wetteloos word. En ons is besig om afgang te neem in plaas dat ons opgang. So ek doen 'n beroep van die regering dat hulle asseblief God 'n kans in hulle lewens sal gee sodat ons land kan floreer. Ek wil net die skrifgie vir u lees en soos u hulle vanmiddag hierso weggaan, wil ek vir u hulle uitdaag en dat u hulle dieselfde skrif sal implementeer en vir u die vraag vra, wat kan ons doen om ons land te kan red? Dit is ingeskrywe, I read it for you in English in Acts 26. It reads as follow from verse 27. I only want to read you 2 verses. 27. King Agrippa, believest thou that the prophets? I know that thou believest. Then Agrippa said unto Paul, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. And I pray and I trust that you people will be persuaded and that you will do the task that you're supposed to do to save our country from chaos. I thank you.
Thank you. You may look at the table. I'm just standing here to kind of keep time, so you're welcome to address our chairperson and the rest of the panel.
Good afternoon. I greet you all in the name of Jesus. Amen. My name is Nombolelo Langeni. I'm from Wynberg. And the problem nesikolo sase Wynberg since 2014. 2014 ndafumanisa into yobana bala rongo i-fees exemption. Ndabhala ileta ndibhalela zonke izikolo because benabantwana abathathu kweza zikolo zoyi-3. Then bandibhalela back ileta be-apologizer. Then ndafuna imali yam back kubo but abade bandinike. And usuka apho bandisa emagqwetheni. Kudala ke ndizama uveza nezinye ii-problems ezipha esikolweni. Ndile kwi-Department of Education ndisendile ile i-email kwi-Minister ye-Basic Education, ndile kwi-Human Rights, ndile nakwi-Public Protector, i-media nayo ndibhalela akho apho ndifumana uncedo khona. Ndiphinde ndabhalela uMinister kwakhona, I think 2 weeks back, because of now that ndingafumani uncedo isikolo sibona into yoba andifumani uncedo because zonke ezi departments zi-4 isikolo, then bathathe illegal action, though besazi into yobana according to i-policy they are not supposed to do that. Nge-19 kaJanuary next year mele ndise e-court ndifumene i-court order. Because of that ndithe kwisikolo andizosibhatala i-school fees because of bayandowa. So ngabo suppose bayandibhatala because of bavumile into yobana benza i-mistake ngokubala rongo exemption, but andide ndifumane ncedo ke. So ndicela i-high level panel ikhe ijonge ezi zikolo, and iwesi ngabantwana abancinci abayana zininzi into ezenzeka phana. Kukho kune-favors zabantwana abathile kwabathile abahoywa abona abantwana abancinci. So ndicela bajonge benze inzame zonto bana bakhe bangene kwezi zikolo, even if banganyula umuntu oyi-1 ozaba neutral ozawujonga into yobana i-governing body iwenza kakuhle na umsebenzi wayo lo suppose uba iyawenza kakuhle. Thank you.
Nkosi, thank you. Just introduce yourself as well, don't forget.
My name is Siwe Toga. I'm from Someleze Social Justice Movement. I just want to acknowledge and to be very grateful of this UN high-level panel. An impact on key legislation is very crucial, particularly in a young democracy. Ours is a very young democracy, so it's bound to have many problems and challenges. And with a negotiated transition and the conditions and the space and the circumstances at the time, 22 years down the line, I'm very grateful that the government has realized how important it is to have a process of this magnitude. Having said so, and I'm very proud of the fact that the public hearing in the Western Cape is taking place a day after we commemorated the death of Madiba, and on the commemoration of the 20 years of our constitution. But I just want to highlight what is important. I will send in a submission. I did send in, my submission is very long. It talks to the 3 key issues. On the social policy, which talks about poverty, the triple challenges of poverty, unemployment, and inequality, and the Health Act, the Justice Act, and the economic policies, and the Safety and Security Acts. Those acts, we have good, as our constitution is applauded everywhere as a progressive constitution, but because we lacked a transition phase, we did not have time to educate and take people through on a process of what it means to be a citizen in a democratic era. I'm hoping that 22 years later, we will sit down and go back and go and assume all the stages that were skipped. The kind of legislation that we've had, particularly the Schools Act on the primary schools of 1996, it's very imperative for us to gain or to participate with our counterparts. But unfortunately, we are lacking monitoring. The monitoring and evaluation is not there, and the accountability framework is not there. And lastly, the lack of inability from the citizen side to hold those that are tasked with those responsibilities. So I want to say the poverty and the unemployment is something that, if we can review some of the legislative framework, can be addressed. But we need to apply our minds, and we need to be honest and to consult all the stakeholders this time around, because the preamble of our constitution stipulates that South Africa belongs to all of us. The third issue on nation building and social cohesion. Without that, we have no country. We need to acknowledge the issue of diversity and agree that because we are different in nature in South Africa, we have diversity issues. So it's going to be a process also, but it needs, honestly and well thought, a framework. Land reform should have made a difference, because land is at the center of the wealth accumulation of the white community when they dispossessed us. But if we have failed to address land reform, land restitution, land redistribution, which is protected in the Constitution, will not be achieved if the government officials keep on relying on the usage of consultants who sometimes have narrow interest and has no idea of what needs to be done. The smallholding farming system for the South African context should be explored. Thank you.
Just announce yourself at the table as well, so that they can get your name there. So once you've made your oral submission, just so that they can get your names right. These are the last 4 people. Thank you.
My name is Mu'adh Khabir. I'm from Equal Education Opportunities Project. I've got 2 things, legislative things. One is SASA, the South African Schools Act of 84 of 1996, and the abuses, and it requires review because it is open to abuse in the following aspects. One is no accountability, particularly how the governing bodies are created, no transparency, used as a discriminatory tool, maintaining the status quo for the elite, and in fact it creates elite schools in the public school system, allows for private individuals to have sway over public property and public resources, creates and accelerates education inequality and social injustice. Section 38A specifically allows for the manipulation of public funds to give and top up teachers who are given the bargaining council salaries over and above because they work more, which creates opportunities for Section 71 schools or Model C schools to poach the best teachers from surrounding areas because they can pay that extra bit more, which means that education across the board, if you go into school in Khayelitsha, whether it's a new school that was built a year ago, you're still going to school in Khayelitsha and the surrounding areas. That's the one thing. And there's a number of sections which I've highlighted here, basically from Section 20, which is the establishment of governing bodies, all the way through till Section 42, including Section 43 specifically, because that is to do with the financials. I'm sitting with an issue right now where the schools, and I'm going to get to the second bit of legislation, which is the PAIA Act, the Promotion of Access to Information, Act 2 of 2000, where there are several sections, and one of the gentlemen from the environmental people spoke about it earlier, where the default position is not to provide information. And this is against the spirit of what PAIA was created. Now, if you take, for argument's sake, that the person who's the information officer is also the person responsible for providing that information, but might be an impacted or an affected person, where is he going to do? He's not going to give you anything. And I'm sitting with this instance now as well, where we are trying to resolve an issue at the school, and they just blatantly refuse to give it, and you have to go to court. Now, if there was another mechanism that takes the court out of it, have these documents presented to a third party or to an independent authority, like a CCMA or something, have them reviewed, and then they decide if that information is important enough to be made public or not, and take it out of the information officer's purview or scope, because they're the ones that are denying the access in the first place. So those are the two things. And again, it's important. I think that legislation was written in 1996 or 1994 with everything being well-meaning and hopefully that everybody sort of play the same rules. But it's being manipulated to such an extent that it's abused and going contrary to the spirit of what it was written for. And because it's so vague also, that it's subject to interpretation, and unfortunately, even in the government sense, that the Department of Education of Gauteng loses its own case, taking a governing body to court for something that is for students, and they are the most vulnerable people. We've spoken about it here. It's early childhood development. It's disabled. It's all of that. It encompasses the whole the ambit of that. And it's something that has to be seen. SASSA has to be reviewed. And I've mentioned the specific section. I will be doing a oral written submission as well. But this is something that absolutely has to be taken to task. Thank you.
Just to mention again, the email address, highlevelpanel@parliament.gov.za. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I greet all the panel. I'm from the Western Cape, Capetonians, traditional leaders. First thing that I'm going to talk about is Grindrod. Grindrod is a company that has been employed by SASSA. There is a problem. As I'm talking to you, I was supposed to be here yesterday. I did not come because of Grindrod. I didn't lost my card. SASSA card fell into there at the bank. I went to them on Friday for the SASSA card. Yesterday, it's full every day. They are making loans for millions and millions of people. And every day, there's a long line. People must be there at 5 o'clock. It is so dangerous. It's happening in Philippines. It is so dangerous to wake up in the morning at 5 o'clock because these boys are robbing us. The second thing is fraud in squatter camps. There are many people who has been robbed off, have been fraudly, their names has been changed in the squatter camps. It is because of the leaders of the squatter camps that is doing that, because they fraudly ask money from other people who just came, meanwhile others has been there for many years. Then I talk about the Forgotten Group Areas Act. Forced removals. Forced removals are us when we were forcibly removed from Claremont, District 6, whatever. The government have forgot about us because they've been looking at the squatter camps to get rid of the squatter camps. Now the backyards are stuck. It was my parents, it's me, it's my children and my grandchildren. Talk about the others. Guguletu, Nyanga, Bondiville, Hanover Park, Parkwood, Heideveld and all those old townships are forgotten. Can the government please look at the Group Areas Act victims that those people have not been, the government has just looked it up, they looked at the squatter camp. Then I go to the District 6. We want to know who is going to be relocated in the District 6 developments, because we as the Group Areas Act victim are the ones who are supposed to be there, because our names with our parents' names when we were forcibly removed are in the files. If other peoples are going to be put there, then there is a problem. We want the government to look at that. Then I'm talking about the museum. Guguletu is one township as a great fat history of fighting against apartheid. We need that there must be a museum that will be built in Guguletu in the corner of NY1, NY3A, and NY53 next to the Civic Hall. Then we talk about the Civic Hall of Guguletu. Since it has been there on 50s, it is still the same building. We need an extension on that building in order that we can even run what you call professional tournaments, because I'm a trainer coach. Then we talk about the past loss victims. I have been arrested in 1978, and I was sentenced 30 days, and I went to prison for 20 days. We need compensation funds. Many people are crying of that. It is a problem because the government are not looking at that. Then we talk about the liberation movement. I was involved. I was deeply involved. I was even in the posters. They're not talking about us. The government is only talking about the veterans, those who were in exile and all that. What about the liberation veterans? Please look at us, because we are crying. Then I'll talk about the land restitution fraud. In the land restitution fraud, there's a case of a claim of F302. You can follow it. It is a real fraud. I'm waiting for a letter back from them in order that I can start fighting against it. It means that many people have been fraudulently lost their money at the land restitution. I'm talking about this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Our time is running out, so keep it short. Thank you.
Thank you, panel, for allowing me to speak. And I would like to greet you in the name of our Lord Jesus. I firstly want to say I've waited long enough
Introduce yourself.
so that my voice may be heard. I am Chantal Seister, and I am not here to represent. I would love to speak in Afrikaans because it's my home language. Ek is hier om 'n dominasie of 'n organisasie te verteenwoordig nie, maar ek is hier om te spreek on behalf of God, because in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, President Mogantle, and because of him we exist, and because of him who gave dominion en heerskappy oor die aarde, het mens vandag die mag en die krag om te heers op aarde en het die eiendom besit in hulle besitting. En ek dink dat terwyl daar so baie dinge in ons country aangaan, en terwyl ek as 'n jong mens groot word in hierdie omstandighede, sien ek daar is so baie dinge wat ek kan noem wat nie reg is nie, maar ek wil dit nog nie noem nie, want ons almal is daarvan bewus. Maar wat ek kom leer het, terwyl ek groot word in hierdie Suid-Afrika, sien ek dat as ons leiers dan nie vir ons 'n voorbeeld is nie, ons wat volg, ons wat jonger ons wat nog opkom om ook te volg, wat gaan word van ons land? En ek dink, terwyl ek is iemand, ek het 'n verhouding met God, en ek is nie skaam om te sê nie, because I know where I come from. And I just want to tell the panel, ons moet onthou waar vandaan ons kom. We are created by God and for the purpose and glory for God, so that we may look after this inheritance which we got from God. En ek dink dat terwyl God vir Adam die heerskappy gegee het, is daar baie dinge wat Adam gekry het as 'n goddelike voorreg om oor te heers. Maar die belangrikste is dat God gave his own rules. God het sy eie wette gegee. En wat ek sien in ons land en ons wetgewingssysteem, baie kere die wette wat ingestel word, it is far away from God's word. And that's why our land is in such a chaos. Dis waarom maar so baie dinge gebeur en ons moer mekaar uit en almal gaan agteruit in plaas van vorentoe, because we lost our focus, we lost our purpose. En ek wil net vir julle vra om net terug te keer na God se wette as julle die wette gaan evalueer en weer instel, because through God we exist and only in him we can exist. And thank you. God bless you.
Ons wil net weer duidelijk maken, al is het nou aan het einde van die dag, dat u is welkom om in een van die 3 talen wat hier in de Westkaap dominante talen is te praten, whether it's English, Tetes, Xhosa of Afrikaans. So daar is interpretation. Die last 2, jy het 1 minuut elk.
Okay, my name is Marco Bentham. I greet the panel. I say good afternoon, and it's a privilege for me to stand here as a young person representing the branch of Bonteheuwel, Ashley Creel branch of Bonteheuwel of the ANC Youth League. My heart cries out, we as a youth crying out of Bonteheuwel to this panel to make a change in our community, because in that community in Bonteheuwel, where it comes into SEPs, you can go give your complaint to SEPs in Bonteheuwel. They never come. They always say they're on the way. When they come, when a person lies there dead in the road, they never come. When you go and report them to the captain of the sector, nothing happens. We as youth has no activity where we can come together. There is community centers, but we can't make use of those community centers in our areas because sports and recreation has taken over in our communities, and now we can't use the community center like we used to, pulling up accountability letters to make use of the venues. There is no more making use of that because there is no use for us as youth. So our voice has never been heard in our area. When will our voices be heard as youth? When will we set new standards? Lives has been taken away of youths at the age of 17 and younger has been killed in our communities. We need to cry out to our executive, we cry out to this panel to do something in our community, to our sectors, to our hospital. The cleanliness of that, there's no cleanliness of that. There is no health of cleanliness. But I trust that you, Mr. President, will do a change in our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Greetings to the panel there in front. One of the problems, to just rush straight into it, the problem that I would like to highlight firstly is the time frame of different legislations. There is amount of time from when an incident occurred up until the point where it is addressed. To give you a living example, my father, who's 76 years of age, he retired when he was 65 years, got his package from the company that he was working for, and he decided to make a living for himself by buying a minibus taxi. Now, he was, procedures weren't followed properly. He ended up not making enough money to sustain his business, and then the bus was repossessed, and he lost 90,000 rands of his retirement money. So when we approached the different departments in government, we were actually told that because a certain amount of time has lapsed, I think it was 5 years, without this being resolved, nothing could happen. And as a result, we just had to give up. So that is one of the concerns that we have. If someone has been murdered, an example, I don't think there's a number of years that whoever has or a number of years that's in place for that person to be persecuted. So I believe that all laws must be treated equally. And then secondly,
Can you wrap up?
okay. All right. Secondly, here in the Western Cape, in Vrygrond, the situation that we are faced with is that we are living on privately owned land. It's owned by the Vrygrond Community Development Trust, and as a result, there is very little development from the government side, as the government is saying that they do not develop on privately owned land. So we would like to highlight that for the panel, maybe to forward our request further to the relevant authorities to just come into Vrygrond and come and assess the situation there. We don't even have a public library or a clinic, which we direly need in Vrygrond. So if this issue can maybe be escalated to the necessary or the relevant authorities for them to come into Vrygrond and just come and examine our case there.
Thank you.
And in the Western Cape, I just want to say that under the current administration that we have, we are suffering. Under the DA, as the ward councillor, the former ward councillor of Ward 65, Sean August, has said with his own mouth that Vrygrond is a gemors place. And he's not going to develop Vrygrond. So we would like to appeal to the rest of the country, to the rest of government, national and provincial and local, to please intervene in the situation because we direly need your help in Vrygrond. Thank you.
The last person, yeah, 1 minute, because as you can see, people are leaving. We'll then ask our chair, former President Motlanthe, to say the final words. So just stay at least so that we also respect our chair so that we can conclude the meeting. You have 1 minute.
Good afternoon. I've been given exactly 1 minute, so thank you. I know you're really tired. I just want to say, first of all, thank you to the panel. I'm surprised you're actually the last people in the room. Usually the panel leaves and it's just the audience that's here. I just want to thank you for creating this platform. I just want to say that normally when a platform like this is created and we give people an opportunity to speak about how they feel about the legislature that's been passed over the past 20 years, a lot of people don't know much about the Constitution, but they do know how they feel. That's why most people come up and they tell you how they feel instead of actually saying more about the Constitution or the laws or these are my recommendations. A person will come up and say how they feel. So I think for future initiatives like this, it would be worth also giving a platform to help people structure their thoughts and their feelings so that when they actually stand up, they can give you information that is relevant to what you're trying to do and what you're trying to hear. Actually, I will make a submission on behalf of my organization. I represent the International Peace Youth Group, but at the same time, I'm actually trying to catch the attention of the Rapporteur for Social Cohesion and Nation Building. I do want some assistance in terms of the submission that I would like to make.
You can write that email to the address, the email address we gave.
Okay.
You can also speak while there's people now. There's a hand. You can go to the lady there. She will help you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time.
So we'll ask President Motlanthe to say the final words. Thank you, each one of you. Okay, let's give a hand for President Motlanthe, just our final words.
Mine is ready to thank everybody for your participation today, primarily the community members from this province. I'd also want to extend a word of thanks to the support staff as well as the interpreters who were able to help us go through the various languages. In my previous life, I was a trade unionist, so I would not want to detain you any further. There's no overtime paid, so we will not detain you any further. We wish you all the best for the festive season, and we hope that you go through this year, see it through, and come back in the new year still in one piece, because the issues that were raised here today need to be addressed, and we don't want these issues to be addressed when you are no more. So please come back alive in one piece next year, and let's all try and at whatever level you are to play a constructive role, because we have the potential and possibilities and promise as a people in South Africa to make this country, prosperous, peaceful, and one that can take care of all of its citizens. The fact that there are those of our people who are excluded even from basic needs is something that must give us the energy and the drive, because for as long as there are people who are deprived, none of us can really be content and satisfied, because as one popular writer puts it, we can't then avoid the fire next time. In order to avoid the fire next time, we must make sure that these issues that we are focusing on, issues of inequality, issues of poverty, issues of unemployment, need to be addressed. Issues of land hunger need to be addressed, so that they serve as a platform for nation building as well as social cohesion. But once again, thank you very much, and travel safely. Go through the festive season and come back in the new year. Thank you.